welcome to the panel discussion, Transformative Power of AI in Business and Society. So we've heard from Katie in terms of how AI is reshaping marketing, sales and the customer experience. We're going to widen it now and look at what the impact of AI is on the wider organization. So whether it's commercial value, kind of workforce readiness, or even the leadership mindset that's needed in this era. So I'm joined by Anna, Randy, and Katie. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, but also at LinkedIn, we like to know a bit more about the person behind the profile, if you like. So when you introduce yourself, you could just tell us one thing that's not on your LinkedIn profile as well. Randy, I'm expecting good things here. You do this a lot, right? So you'll be fine. I'll give you a minute to think. I'll start with Anna, if that's okay.
Hello, everyone. CEO and co-founder of Code First Girls. I also hold numerous different advisory positions in government. So on behalf of the Treasury, I'm also part of the Government Skills Council as well, which has the absolutely amazing task over the next 2 months to write the digital jobs plan for the future, being fed in by things like industrial strategy and things like that. But just 2 seconds on Code First Girls. We are actually one of the largest suppliers of female agentic AI talent now into about 130 different companies.
Wow.
Didn't expect the clap so early on. Love it. Can I just carry you around with me everywhere I go? I mean, it is panto season. Something that's not on my LinkedIn profile. So I feel like I do so many complex technology transformations on a weekly basis. And sometimes that's not a cool place to be. Trust me, it's not a conversation you want to have with your friends in the pub. So at the weekend, I try and have a complete technology-free weekend. Because I also believe that with this rapid pace of change, you have to be able to connect with the real world. And if you can't put the tech down, there's a problem. Having said that, if it weren't for the tech at the weekend, I still couldn't be reminded to charge my EV. So it's there no matter what.
There you go. Thank you, Anna. I think this morning I did the check on the phone how many times you pick it up in a day, which is quite scary as well. So perhaps I need to follow your example of the weekends. Randy.
So Randy Petway, I am a go-to-market leader here at LinkedIn, literally in this building is where I work. And one of the first projects I worked on is when we were building out the Experience Center. So excited to do that from here. I lead our go-to-market business for our global accounts. So global accounts are kind of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies across EMEA and Latin America. And I've been working at LinkedIn for about going on 7 years, and here in London for 2 years. Something not on my LinkedIn profile, I was thinking about this, and we do this quite a bit, but my first AI project was in 1998. And I was sure that AI was going to stick, and from that point forward, everyone would be using it. And this was back in the financial industry. It didn't happen, obviously. And then in 2007, I wrote a paper about a technology that underlies AI. And in the paper, I said within a year, this was going to change everything, and AI would be the #1 thing used for content discovery. So that was in 2007. So my tagline has been since then that I've lost a lot more money being early than I've made being right. So there we go.
Thank you, Randy. Katie, something that's not on your LinkedIn profile.
I'm going to level it now and not be so highbrow. I sing in a covers band, so I've got Joel doing the photography, who plays the keyboard, and Seb, who's my amazing drummer. So that's one thing. I'm going to be greedy and have one more. I've written a draft novel. Some of you, a handful of people have read it. First half is pretty good. Second half needs a bit of work, but my nan was married to the Sultan of Zanzibar in the Second World War. Okay. So yeah, that's my passion. That's why.
Are you singing afterwards?
No. If we stayed later and I got really drunk, I might. But...
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so I was trying to think of what's something in terms of what's not on my LinkedIn profile, and yeah, I wasn't going to go too highbrow either. So in the 80s, I was it's obviously ages me. I was a Scout of the Year.
Woohoo!
So I can do knots, light a fire, kind of. Thank you. Okay. So I'm happy with that. I'll take that. Okay. So let's begin with what's real today. So AI is everywhere in the headlines, but the impact varies hugely between organisations. So Katie, if I could start with you. So your new book offers frameworks for embedding AI into cross-commercial functions, if you like. So from what you're seeing, how far along do you think organisations are in terms of turning AI from hype into real measurable outcomes?
I think it really varies. There aren't many. I mean, I think there's that classic sort of early majority who've dabbled with pilots for this and getting everybody bought in and having licenses for Copilot and so on. I don't think we're anywhere near that. I was talking about the trough of disillusionment. We then go up to the plateau of productivity. I don't think we're there in many industries. So I think we're at that point where people get it now. They know it's absolutely essential and they are investing in the training. They see its impact in little iterations across their marketing, their selling, their HR, but there's no enterprise-wide rollout and ROI, across the board. That's going to come.
Yeah.
But, along comes agentic, along comes all these
course.
other AIs, and it's hard for people to keep up.
Great, thank you. And then Randy, so obviously you mentioned you work closely with global LinkedIn clients. So if you look at how your team are using AI at the moment in terms of creating that personal outreach, that effective outreach, I guess the key being without kind of losing that human touch. Can you touch on that for us, please?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people think we're going to lose the human touch and a personalized touch because of AI, and I kind of look at it, and our teams look at it a bit differently. I don't think many of us send an important email without writing a draft and then correcting the draft and then writing the redraft and then maybe sending it at some point. And when you think about how AI can contribute to that, if AI can create the first draft, which is where you'll spend a lot of time, then you can spend, and our teams can spend a lot of times personalizing that. Not just personalizing it so that it has your voice, but personalizing it for the audience that you're sending it to. And we do quite a bit of that. We had a person on our team, this was a couple of years ago when ChatGPT was really taking off. They ingested the correspondence that they had gotten from the person they were writing to so that they could better understand their communication style. Is it brief? Is it verbose? A lot of bullets, not bullets. And then they used that to craft the email to personalize the way they were communicating with the person on the other end. So they kept their voice, but they catered the message to the way that it would appear that the person on the other end wanted to receive that. So by moving a lot of the grudge work out of it, it allows you to put your personal flavor on it, make it more contextual and more meaningful to whoever you're communicating with. And that's what personalization really comes down to.
Cool, love that. Thank you, Andy. And Anna, there's a kind of perception out there in terms of AI expertise often sits at the top of the organisation. I guess the kind of interest in terms of how low code, no code AI can help democratize that knowledge and then reduce the kind of anxiety from employees around that change.
Yeah, so even though I'm in technology, I studied English and history in undergrad for my sins. And I'm a big believer in, if you look at history and look at patterns through history around various skills revolutions, you can see and spot trends. And they broadly follow the same trends, right? So initially, you're going to have incubation of the idea. You're then going to have infrastructure build. You're then going to be looking at things like crisis, right? So what's the crisis that takes place? It's a usual social and economic form of crisis. The next stage is wide deployment, and then the final stage is exhaustion. And for the first time in history, we actually have two skills revolutions, the third and the fourth, overlapping, because we were only at the point of wide deployment on the kind of coding and computer revolution when AI hit. Within those cycles as well, you get different management cycles or workplace cycles. So the two cycles that you see within that at the point of crisis, right, is very much, number one, it's a top-down approach. It's a top-down approach that suits the technology, that suits the organization, where you're going to have exclusive knowledge held at the top. But that can only last for so long, because what you're going to see is a huge amount of conflict developing with your employees. the second stage, the second phase that has to come is what's going to happen from the bottom up, right? What's going to be grassroots? We're all consumers anyway, right? Consumers invariably are ahead of the organization anyway. So what we're now seeing is organizations saying, okay, low code, no code, democratizing that to our employees is going to be the second phase of rollout. And unless they do it, conflict is going to arise in the organization.
Cool. Thank you, Anna. So if we shift to, I think what is arguably the biggest transformation, which is agentic AI. I think we've all seen it kind of emerge even faster than kind of last year's Gen AI, if you like. So, Anna, I'm going to stick with you if that's okay. So organizations have literally just got to grips with Gen AI. Now agentic AI is coming in even faster. So what does it mean for workforce readiness? So in terms of, if I'm a leader, where should I prioritize in the kind of upskilling piece first?
Yeah, so I reckon across our client base alone, and we must deal with, there's hundreds of thousands of employees within it. I reckon about 10% had adopted Gen AI before agentic AI hit. So within those kind of phases that I described earlier, you're then getting new technology upon new technology upon new technology. What that effectively means for the vast proportion of organizations is that they've entered a bit of a paralysis, in my opinion. Okay, so from a skills perspective, they were still working out what skills they needed to actually deploy on Gen AI, and then agentic hit. And what you're seeing more than ever is actually, I think, organizations struggling to put their workforce plans together.
Yeah.
Right. And the only thing they can go to, and we see it all the time at Code Plus Girls, is that you have your core workforce plan. That is what you know. That is not what you know to be true. You've got historic data on it. You can run it year in, year out. And then around these new skills, right, or these niche skill sets, what you're starting to develop is a more kind of agile, fluid way of developing talent pools that enable you to bring in these specialist skills and bring them in quite quickly. But there's one thing for certain, it's not just for existing technologists or coders or engineers or developers, right? It is also for what I describe tech adjacent employees. They're employees probably like yourself that are going to be working with technology day in and day out, but they have to learn how to use the tools.
Great. Thank you, Anna. And then, so Randy, we've worked together for a couple of years. I know you've been a big voice in LinkedIn around kind of AI adoption and upskilling. So what do you think is working well inside LinkedIn, for example, when it comes to helping teams adopt
Yeah.
AI?
So I probably would start with what hasn't worked well. Very similar to what Anna's saying. We've gone through a change here. Adoption was not very high early on. We're owned by Microsoft, so we got a peek into who was a big investor in OpenAI. So we got a peek into ChatGPT before most of the world did, and yet I would say early on our adoption rate was very, very low. And I think part of the reason for that is, and this is a mantra that I use quite a bit, this is not about technology. Unless you're an engineer building it, it's not about technology. It's about change management. It's about culture. It's about people management. So more recently, we've seen our adoption going up, and it's because we've kind of done a bit more to embed this in the culture of what we do, giving people the area to experiment, trying to create mechanisms where if someone does something, exceptional with AI, how do we make sure that more people find out about that and it doesn't just live in a silo somewhere? Not making an assumption about what will be useful to people. So about a month ago, so every month we'll do a spotlight on different things happening with AI. We have an reward program rather, that we do quarterly, where we nominate people for great work they've done. But one of the things that stood out to me about a month ago is that we were talking about, just little seed projects people had done with AI. And we had someone from our legal team. And I don't know about you and your businesses, but from my perspective, if I don't hear from legal all year, that's a great year, all right? So we had this person who theoretically what they're doing doesn't necessarily apply to our business, but they talked about using AI to accelerate onboarding for new hires in their department. And I think every other group sitting there said, that's something we have problems with onboarding. We might not do it the exact way, but just the idea of hearing about what someone else was doing with AI and then thinking about, now how can I use that to do that? Well, that's an example of getting it embedded in the culture, getting communication around what people are doing, and allow people to think of this as solving business problems or personal problems as opposed to a technology project.
Right. I love that bit about kind of what's not working at the start rather than looking at the other way around. Katie, I love this next question. So obviously you've worked with boards and governments. I think this is a question that a lot of people in the room will probably have. I know a lot of my friends have, is kind of what are the new roles or kind of capabilities that are emerging in this space that didn't exist 5 years ago?
So many new job titles that didn't exist before. I mean, we've got the AI ethics advisors, haven't we? We've got AI governance and ethics lead, those sorts of things. I'm seeing quite a lot with all sectors. It's like an AI literacy champion as well. I know we've got an AI tag against all of these, but we've moved from chief digital officer and some of those that came around because of all the social platforms into titles that are helping people cope with this new wave of work. And then maybe sort of an AI business lead. And that is, by its very nature, much more strategic. So I think we've got kind of a lot of people owning the AI, but I think the biggest one I'm seeing is people realizing that they've got to create a group of AI champions in their organization, because there might be small companies and they haven't got the ability to have all those job titles. So they pull someone, it might be the office manager, it might be someone owning legal, and they bring them together and they meet fortnightly or monthly and they share best practice around best prompts or best example we've seen or what isn't working and so on. So I think that for the smaller companies or those that are a bit further back in their evolution, less about big change names, but actually about new structures and so on.
Great.
But baking agility into their everyday way of working.
I love that, getting people from different parts of the organisation as well, not just from the kind of same area. I think it's really,
Because otherwise it's all tech,
absolutely.
and the techies will rule. And
Well, staying on that, so Anna, if I could come to you,
we don't want that.
in terms of no one wants that. From what you're seeing in kind of non-technical and kind of tech adjacent roles, what's the kind of what are those roles that need that kind of AI capability most over the next 12 to 18 months? I know that's like a bit of a $1 million question, but again, kind of a really interesting area.
I think there are so many countless applications, right? Like if we wanted to, we could plot out all of the potential use cases. Don't think I've found a job group yet within our existing client base where there is not a use case. Having said that, where I see it most is probably in what I call revenue generating opportunities. So I think there's a bit of a misconception about AI, because whenever I hear about AI, they talk about efficiency, right? Efficiency is the word of the day. I mean, it's a boring word as well, apart from anything else. A far more exciting way of looking at it is, what revenue can I derive from using AI? So a use case example that we're dealing with at the moment, we are working with a massive organization on transforming their service desk and customer experience, because they are no longer what they used to be called, which is, say, a field engineer or a customer experience expert. In the future, or thanks to our help, they're going to be prompt engineers. So your customer experience desk will become prompt engineers. But do they know how to use prompts? Do they understand the difference between agentic and LLMs, and then how to use the tools that they've been given in order to get the best from it? I think engagement with the tools is really, really important as well. I think the last stat I heard, I hope don't mind me saying this in a Microsoft-owned business, but for something like Copilot with enterprise-wide rollout, I often hear things like 18% engagement rates. So it's not enough getting the tool in there. It's about how they're engaging with the tool and actually how effectively are they using those tools. And you can imagine, I can so imagine it with, for example, with a big insurance company, right? May have grown through acquisition, lots of different potential product portfolios to sell, but you wouldn't necessarily know if that individual was able to buy or be viable for a certain product unless you have the ability to prompt the system and then to connect across the portfolios. How much easier does that make selling to that individual? Absolutely.
Great, thank you, Anna. And Casey, you've talked about organisational readiness. So what kind of organisational structural shifts do you think are required I guess, for companies to be truly, well, to truly become AI first in their approach?
I think we've got to have consent, haven't we? We've got to have the kind of governance, because if you lose trust, if you haven't got trustworthy data, if you're not compliant with all the different regulations, you've lost it. So I think you've got to have a team of people who are owning the compliance, the data, the trust, all of that sort of side of things. But I think you've got to have strategy. You've got to mostly have the strategists rather than having all the money spent on the tech people, because you've got to be thinking about your competitive advantage. You've got to be thinking about where some of those proofs of concept might come from, and then how do you roll that out? You've got to have the HR teams in place doing the upskilling and the cultural agenda. So it's kind of everything, but deciding what the priorities are, because we can't all do everything at once. We haven't got the budget. So I think strategically, and then thinking, how do we prioritize, and then how do we do that in a way that we take people with us rather than making them just be crippled with fear.
Yeah, great. And Randy, from a from a commercial lens, what are the kind of common barriers you think you see when kind of organizations are trying to kind of scale AI beyond just kind of isolated teams?
Yeah, so I mean, probably two areas I see as barriers, consistent barriers and themes. One, going back to what Anna said, so if you look at Copilot adoption at 18%, whatever it is, it's not as high as we'd like to see it. One of the reactions that leaders will often have to that is we're going to put in place more metrics and we're going to set more targets. And there's a saying that when a metric becomes a target, it ceases to be a good metric. So what you see are things like we'll have organizations who say, we're going to automate X number of processes by this time using AI. And everyone will go and they'll do that and they'll hit that number and everybody claps and high fives, and you'll find that's had absolutely no impact on the business. You've automated 100 things, but those 100 things aren't having any impact. And whereas you could have maybe picked two things that had a material impact, where people have said, my job just got easier. My job just got better. My ability to pursue opportunities just got better. And that would have driven real adoption and belief in the technology, rather than standing up applauding a metric that you've hit that's had absolutely no material impact on the business. So that's one barrier that I see quite frequent. And that's not unique to AI. That is just in business in general. We try to solve things with numbers without really thinking about what's the impact that's coming from those numbers. The other thing I see as a barrier is we treat everyone in our universe of employees or students or whatever organization that we're trying to move the same. And that's not true. There was a book written a number of years ago that a lot of you may have read called Crossing the Chasm. And it talks about how to bring technology to market and get it over the hump. The hump being, at the beginning, you have a small people who will use it or want to buy whatever the product or the technology is, but getting it to the masses is very difficult, and you have to cross the chasm to get there. And the idea is that on one side of the chasm, you have your innovators and your early adopters. And on the other side, you have your late adopters, your early majority actually is what they call them, your late majority and your laggards. And if we treat all of those groups the same, so if we treat our laggards like we treat our early adopters, we will fail. And here's where you'll see that. So you run a pilot, and you're going to run a pilot, let's say, for something related to AI, and you'll say, okay, we need people to participate in the pilot. And we'll go to our leaders and we'll say, okay, we need you to nominate people. They will always pick the innovators because they know the innovators are going to be excited, they'll be engaged, they'll work with it, and they'll try to make it happen. And that is inevitably going to give you a false positive. Because of course your innovators are going to lean in, they're going to experiment with it, they're going to ignore the things that don't quite work because they see the big picture. And then we do the pilot, it's successful, and then we wonder why nobody else adopts it. Well, because not everyone else is innovators, and you haven't created a model. How am I going to bring this to my late adopters? How am I going to bring this to the laggards so that they want to use it and understand how to use it as well? The other thing that happens quite a bit, because we don't think about these groups differently, is we assume that the innovators and the early adopters are going to help us bring it to the rest of the organization. And that's not what they're going to do, because usually those are the people who just want to move on to the next thing. I've proven that it worked. It's helping me. Give me the next clever thing. No, I don't want to be part of your change management process. So we have all of these different groups, and they all need to be catered to in a different way if you really want to drive adoption and cross the chasm with whatever you're trying to adopt.
I'm sure you set a metric that became a target once.
Yeah,
Fine.
I probably did.
I'm looking at-
By the way, everything I say that's wrong, it's because I've done it. So, yeah.
Cool. We're tight on time because I know Emma's kind of staring at me from across the side. But there's a few more questions I just want to touch on because I think they're really important around that kind of ethics and trust piece. So Anna, I'll come to you first. In terms of when you think about agentic systems, particularly, they become embedded in workflows. They start to make autonomous decisions. What are the ethical considerations that execs should be thinking about when it comes to this space?
Yeah, no, I think this, if you even think about the word agentic, right, it comes from the word agency, which essentially means that it has the ability to make its own decisions. The biggest ethical consideration here is what if the decision it is making was not the intention of the human that designed it in the first place? Case in point, and I don't want to put a downer on the night, but ChatGPT right now in someone writing a prompt in, for example, around a teenager wanting to kill themselves, should that therefore give the teenager a plan as to how to go and do that? Right. And that's where ChatGPT has crossed from, say, pre-23 ChatGPT, which was just purely LLM, to agentic ChatGPT, where it can make multi-executed situations and decisions. Was it the intention of the person or the designers behind it? I certainly hope not, and I don't think it was. So therefore, a couple of things need to quite urgently happen, right? Number one, we always need a human in the loop. However you're using agentic AI, it could mean, I'm going to come back to that word, efficiency, whether you're coding. It doesn't really matter. You still need a human in the loop to, number one, check the quality of the translation, and number two, to be able to understand the efficacy of the situation. And if you don't have that accountability and you're not using humans in that way, I think bad things are going to happen. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, and I would be completely remiss without saying it, is that the people creating and designing these systems, I'm talking about the super techie agentic AI stuff now, we have to make sure that there's a level of diversity of thought in whoever is creating these systems. If we do not do that, we are not thinking through different situations from different perspectives, and we end up with groupthink. And groupthink, in whatever circumstance, is not going to work well. Again, case in point, how agentic AI can be used for things like cyber attacks. If it's thought of and built by a diverse group of people, they will think through the various circumstances and attack paths that wouldn't be thought of if one group that look and sound the same are essentially building this up. So make sure your talent is diverse as well.
Cool. Thank you. I'm going to wrap up now. I'm going to give you each 30 seconds because if I go longer than that, I'm in massive trouble. If you could give one piece of advice to every business leader in the room here, in terms of how to future-proof their organization for the AI decade ahead, and that's a big question. What would that be? So, Katie, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, mine would be not to be fearful of it, not to think that that you have to be technical to use it. Get started, but don't risk kind of big areas that are going to sink money. I think it's doing some small proofs of concept, like I've talked about. Get the right kind of training and education and so on. So I think it is, having the mindset for change, getting started rather than thinking it's on my 1 year, 3 year business. Get started now, and get some frameworks. That's probably about 6 different things, but you kind of have to do all those things. So be strategic with it. Don't hold back. Don't be frightened of it. Get stuck in because you've got no choice.
Great. Thank you. Love that. Randy.
Big plus one on getting started. The other thing I'll say is going back to the what we were talking about earlier with trust and integrity is as a leader, be mindful that one thing I can assure you AI is going to do is it's going to be a mirror for the culture that you already have as an organization, and it's going to amplify that culture. If it's bad, it's going to amplify it in a bad way, and if it's good, it's going to amplify it in a good way. So be hyper conscious of that.
Cool. Thank you. And Anna.
First thing I'd say is build consciously. I think that's really important. If you're going to build with the kind of the human at the heart of it. and you will build something better. And the second thing that I would say is that with the onset of things like AI, you've got to be super wary of the type of talent that you bring into the process. And agile. Agile is my third point. Please, if you're going to do it, don't be so frightened that you've got a paralysis about it. If you're going to fail, fail fast, iterate, and move on and keep doing it. Like, it needs to have that product operating mindset. Otherwise, you'll never get anything off the ground.
Great, love that. Thank you. So, Katie, Randy, Anna, thank you for being part of that conversation. I think if there's one theme that kind of stands out for me this evening, it's not AI is not just changing how we work. It kind of changes how we should lead as leaders. I think how we learn, how we kind of take on board information, also how we connect as well. I think that's kind of resonated with me tonight. So we're at the end. We're now going to move to the network session, the festive network session. Sorry, Emma. So I would just encourage you all to let's keep the conversation going. We've got some industry experts here. There's lots of industry experts in the room. Really looking forward to the conversation over the next half hour or so. And thank you very much.